Well, welcome back to the King's Coalition, and if you've been following the previous few videos, we have been responding to a video entitled 10 Core Christian Beliefs That Jesus Never Taught, and we have been responding to them sequentially, and we have come to the seventh core belief that Jesus never taught on, and it's going to be a very interesting one. Again, there seems to be a need for the disconnect between the teachings of Paul and the teachings of Jesus that we find in the Gospels. This one is all about the lordship of Jesus and whether we should be calling Jesus Lord and whether that is even necessary. Is that something that the Apostle Paul and others, and ultimately the early church in more formulations of doctrines came up with? Or is it something that Jesus actually commanded himself? So I'm going to share my screen once again, and we're going to watch this together and see if we can respond to it, and let me know your thoughts as well.
Number 8 difference. Did Jesus say that in order to be saved, we must call him Lord? Well, Paul does, and this is a favorite of all the evangelicals. And when I was in ministry, we used this all the time, that if we confess with our mouth Jesus as Lord and believe God raised him from the dead, we will be saved.
So I think this is number 8. Maybe I've lost count for this. I'm not sure if he said it all correctly sequentially either, but either way, here's the argument. And it does fill me with a little bit of sadness that he said he was once in ministry, and now of course he's obviously not in ministry and not a Christian anymore. But it is very sad. Again, I don't know who this person is, and I wanted to give him the time and the benefit because he's taken the time. He's got a lovely set behind him, and he's taken the time to respond to it. I don't think any of these are worth taking too seriously, but I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt and give him the time that I think this video deserved.
And everyone that calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. But Jesus he says the opposite. He asks the rhetorical question, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things I tell you to do? And not everyone that calls me Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven. It's the ones that do the will of the Father that actually do the things that Jesus teaches here in the gospel, and not those who just call him Lord, Lord.
See, I think this is where we get into poor hermeneutics, poor interpretation, and really, if I may say, lazy interpretation of what Jesus is saying here, and a misrepresentation of what Jesus is saying. I'll briefly mention about his reference to the Apostle Paul there in Romans 10:13. We see it also very clearly in the book of Acts, in Peter's first sermon. But it doesn't just begin there. It's a prophecy, actually, of Joel, that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And there's a lot of theology there that we don't really have the time to go into. But I think we shouldn't just dismiss that as something that is clearly not relevant here. The early church, the early disciples of Jesus, clearly looked at Jesus and thought, this individual, this Messiah, this is God incarnate. This is truly God. This is truly man. Whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Of course, that in Joel is clearly a reference to Yahweh. And the early church used that in reference to Jesus, a clear high Christology of who Jesus is. That's not the point that this individual is making, though, in this video. He's saying that Jesus never commanded us to call Jesus Lord, but it was to do the work of the Father. Now, the question would be, well, why would it be not both in that very same interpretation of that scripture? In Matthew chapter 7, verse 21, this is the same version that he was mentioning. It says that not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter, but only the one who does the will of my Father. Now, Jesus doesn't say, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter, because you don't need to call me Lord, Lord. You just need to do the work of the Father. There seems to be here that Jesus, in this very verse that he is referencing, that Jesus affirms both the confession that is necessary, Lord, and the obedience. I don't see how that cannot be a faithful interpretation of what Jesus is saying in that very passage. Both are necessary. The confession that Jesus is Lord, and the obedience, therefore, of the will of the Father. That seems to be the best interpretation, at least in my opinion, of that particular passage. Yes, Romans 10:9 does say, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, that you will be saved. Now, is this clearly a distortion of what Jesus was saying in the Gospels? I don't think so. Again, just because we don't have a specific reference of Jesus saying, hey, by the way, it's probably best that you call me Lord because that's who I am, doesn't mean that that is not what we as Christians are supposed to do in response to Jesus. In addition, there are many references in the Gospels themselves that seem to point to Jesus at least accepting that title. Now, of course, Kyrios can be just master or sir, but there seems to be some references in the Gospels where that becomes a little more closer to a higher Christology than a lower Christology. The moment when Jesus calms the storm would be a good indication there. When in John's Gospel, Thomas, when he sees Jesus and he sees the nails in his wrists and in his feet, he responds by saying, "My Lord and my God." Now, this may be a slight argument from silence, but we'd never have a specific reference. This is why I don't think it's too much of an argument from silence. We don't have a specific reference where Jesus says, "Oh, you've been calling me Lord, and I hope you mean that I hope you mean sir or master. I hope you don't mean that you're putting me on par with God there, because that would be wrong." Same thing in Mark's Gospel when Jesus calms the storm and they come down and the English translation, at least, is they worship him. Again, some people may say that I believe it's proskuneo. Some people may say that no, it's not worship. It's actually it's actually to it's actually to like to bow down or whatever. I may not have the Greek word there correctly there, but either way, there isn't a moment where Jesus says, "Don't call me Lord." Guess we don't have a moment where he says, "Make sure you call me Lord, Lord." But again, we don't have that moment when it seems to be that the disciples are calling him Lord, that he admonishes him for that. And again, if we go back to Matthew chapter 7, there seems to be that what Jesus is saying here is not everyone who says to me, "Lord, Lord." Again, it seems to be that there's an affirmation that this confession of Jesus as Lord is necessary. The obedience to do the will of the Father is necessary too, but there doesn't seem to be this need for an either or. It seems to be a both and I think this is why you see more formulation of that, at least in the very, very early church, that you must confess who Jesus is, and you must therefore do the kingdom work. And there's a both and situation there. Let me know if there are any scripture references that you think would be good to respond to this. Let me know your thoughts down below. Make sure you give this video a like on the way out and subscribe if you are new as well, and share and get these responses out. I think these dialogues are very important for us as a community and for us to respond to these general arguments as well. Well, thank you for watching this video, and in the next video, we will respond to the next video. I'm not going to do the numeration anymore because I think I'm losing count of this at this point. But I'll see you in the next video as we respond to the next core belief that Jesus supposedly never taught on.